Head to the polls tomorrow. Berman and I will be there as well. We should let you know. We'll be in New Hampshire.
We're not registered, but we're still going to go.
That's not going to stop us. The Democratic race is turning contentious. The leading candidates taking jabs at each other, hoping to blunt Pete Buttigieg and his momentum. Jeff Zeleny is back with us. Also joining us, CNN political correspondent Abby Phillip and CNN political commentator Mark McKinnon. He's a former senior advisor to the George W. Bush and McCain campaigns. Great to see all of you. We'll be there with you as well. Okay, so let's look at how, Abby, let's just start by looking at how Joe Biden is sort of, it appears, trying to set expectations low for New Hampshire. So listen to what he said on Friday.
This is a long race. I took a hit in Iowa, and I'll probably take a hit here. Traditionally, Bernie won by 20 points last time, and usually it's the neighboring senators that do well.
Okay, is that new, or has he always thought that he wasn't going to do well in Iowa and New Hampshire?
His campaign has definitely been lowering expectations for a while, but Allison, I mean, the part about that is the most surprising is that nobody wants to be told that a candidate doesn't want your vote, essentially, or doesn't think that they're going to do well. I mean, I think his aides probably would have wished that he would have said something else or literally anything else, which is why over the last day or so, you've seen him kind of saying the opposite, saying, I'm really going to fight here. I really want your vote. You know, they have to be careful that they don't lower expectations so much that voters here basically say, what's the point? And I mean, in fact, one of the questioners at his event yesterday basically said, how do you explain your electability argument if you did so poorly in Iowa? I mean, that is really the big question for Joe Biden right now. And that's the one that he's going to have to answer for New Hampshire voters. And if he doesn't answer it for New Hampshire voters, it is going to make it more difficult for him to make the case to Nevada voters and to South Carolina voters that he is the electable one if he can't pull off at least a relatively strong finish in these first two early states.
So, Mark McKinnon, one of the things you can tell in the days leading up to the New Hampshire primary is sort of who is the hot ticket. Who are the candidates that people want to see, not necessarily because they're going to vote for them, but just to say that they were there or just to get a piece of the vibe that exists. In this weekend, looking at the size of the rallies and the energy at the events, Bernie Sanders has always had good events in New Hampshire, and he'll have a big rally tonight with the Strokes. But Pete Buttigieg, and I know you're at one of his events, and Amy Klobuchar were bringing in lots of people. It seemed to be that people wanted to be at those events, to check them out, to see what folks were talking about. What did you see up in New Hampshire yesterday?
That's exactly right, John. This is the point of the campaign where there's an old saying that good gets better and bad gets worse. The good is obviously Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, but Amy Klobuchar may be that little engine that could. Her events were just packed right now, and New Hampshire always likes to turn things on its head a little bit, do things a little differently than what Iowa does. So keep an eye on Amy Klobuchar, and of course Joe Biden is the bad gets worse. Really having a tough time, and Warren seems to be having a difficult time as well, kind of flatlining, because Sanders is soaking up all the heat. But I would say right now that, you know, it's not necessarily who wins, because Bernie Sanders is likely to win and should, but it's always an expectations game. So the surprise, I would guess right now, might be Amy Klobuchar.
Jeff, do you agree with that it's not necessarily who wins, but who surprises the field?
Well, sure. I mean, if Bernie Sanders wouldn't win here in New Hampshire, it would really be extraordinary. I mean, let's not forget he won by 21 points 4 years ago, and he is leading in every way going into this. He's from neighboring Vermont. I agree with Mark. I mean, the energy and the crowds and just the interest in Amy Klobuchar is certainly, you can feel it. It was that strong debate performance and just the sense of, I think freshness in some respect. A lot of these candidates have been here for a long time, and she actually has been as well, but people have been giving her a second look. So I was struck. I was at an event of hers last evening and saw many voters who have never seen her before and were quite interested in her message. Now, she, of course, is unlikely to win or get second, maybe even third, but imagine the scenario of if she would come in ahead of Joe Biden. That would be disastrous for the Biden campaign, certainly good for the Klobuchar campaign. So that's how they're thinking of this. And Elizabeth Warren, I think we are keeping an eye on her as well. She had such strength here in New Hampshire throughout the summer and the fall. She's campaigned here so many times. There just does not seem to be the enthusiasm surrounding her candidacy. Going into tomorrow, those are some of the things we're watching here. But I think when you step back, it is the Biden campaign, really a lack of energy. Joe Biden essentially cannot wait to get out of New Hampshire. He's said as much. The question is, what shape will he leave in?
You know, Abby, it is interesting when you're looking at Pete Buttigieg, and all of a sudden now all the candidates seem to be ganging up on him. But the Buttigieg campaign and the Sanders campaign, they seem to be okay with the notion that they will both emerge from New Hampshire. They like the idea of a one-on-one fight going forward, if it comes to that. I'm not saying it is, but they like that narrative.
Yeah, they're perfectly fine being in the front runner position right now, but for different reasons. I think the Sanders campaign feels comfortable that they have a campaign in terms of their supporters that has more longevity to it, where they can go into Nevada and feel pretty good about their starting point there, which is being in the lead or being at the front of the pack. Now, the Buttigieg campaign, I was talking to aides yesterday, and they are actually really kind of happy with the amount of attention that is being put on him. The fact that all of the other candidates seem to be obsessed with the idea of taking him down a notch. And what it has allowed him to do is just double down on the message that he's had for months now, frankly. I mean, there's really nothing new, not a whole lot new in his stump, even in the face of these new attacks from Joe Biden and from Bernie Sanders. He's been saying the same thing. And so it's actually just given a lot more oxygen to his existing message. And I think that they feel like they need that because unlike the Sanders campaign, I do think that they have a lot more work to do when they get to Nevada and particularly when they get to South Carolina. So they think just being at the center of attention at this particular moment, not a bad thing at all. And they're taking advantage of it as much as they possibly can. And when it comes to that kind of energy that you were talking about, Buttigieg had massive crowds yesterday. One thing to note, though, many of them are political tourists coming in from neighboring states of Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, people who are just want to be a part of the spectacle. So there's a little bit of that going on right now in New Hampshire, too.
Mark, one of the questions, obviously, for voters tomorrow is how much does experience matter and what kind of experience, right? So you heard this weekend former Vice President Biden going after Buttigieg and, sort of downgrading or downplaying his experience as a mayor. And then you heard the same thing from Amy Klobuchar about what's better, being a senator or being a mayor. So let me just play this moment that people felt was very strong from Amy Klobuchar at the debate. Listen to this.
You said, Pete, as you were campaigning through Iowa, as three of us were jurors in that impeachment hearing, you said it was exhausting to watch and that you wanted to turn the channel and watch cartoons. It is easy to go after Washington because that's a popular thing to do. It is much harder to lead and much harder to take those difficult positions because I think this going after every single thing that people do because it's popular to say and makes you look like a cool newcomer. We have a newcomer in the White House, and look where it got us.
Mark, do people want Washington experience right now? Do voters want that, or do they want a newcomer?
Well, Washington's not very popular, and that's why people run against Washington. Of course, that's why Donald Trump ran against the establishment and people with experience. So experience doesn't have the cachet that it used to. I think the wisdom of the attack from Klobuchar was not so much about experience, but it was about being serious. Mm-hmm. It's about being a serious candidate. So the whole attack on Pete as sort of saying, I didn't want to watch that stuff in Washington. I wanted to watch cartoons. That was more of sort of an attack on just the weight of the times and the gravity of what's happening in our culture and our politics, more than the issue of experience. And I think that was a smart attack, actually.
Hey, Mark, very quickly, in 2000, after you guys got shellacked, after George W. Bush got beat bad in New Hampshire.
Don't take that the wrong way.
But there's a point to this. You guys pivoted, and all of a sudden, George W. Bush was a reformer with results. You were able to turn him into something a little bit different as you headed to South Carolina and other states. But how hard will that be for someone like Joe Biden, who's got 40 years at least in this business?
That's a great point, John. So we came into New Hampshire as the front runner in 2000 and then lost by 18 points I mean, we got knocked to our knees in the snow. And what happens when that occurs, which is what has happened at Biden and Iowa, is you have to send a message that you've gotten the message from voters and that you understand that you've got to do something differently. So we did the reset. As you said, we talked about being a reformer with results, which positioned us against McCain, who was trying to say he was the reformer. And we said, well, yeah, it's one thing to be a reformer, but you got to get stuff done. So that's the issue, really, is to say that you've gotten the message. The question, which I think is outstanding, is has Biden gotten that message? And has he sent a clear message to voters that I heard you, I got it, we're doing something different?
Jeff, Mark, Abby, thank you all very much. Former Vice President Joe Biden speaks to CNN's Don Lemon ahead of the New Hampshire primary. That's tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. And tomorrow morning, New Day will be live from Manchester, New Hampshire.
So, on coronavirus, the reason there's so much concern over the spread of this around the world is breaking news like this. The number of cases on a cruise ship in quarantine in Japan doubled overnight. Do they have this situation under control? That's next.
After a dramatic